On a quiet afternoon in the affluent neighborhood of Newport Beach, California, an eerie silence enveloped a luxurious mansion. 3 children stood confused at their bus stop, waiting for parents who never arrived as minutes ticked by. That night, a strange call from an unfamiliar gas station ignited a storm of suspicion. And when police broke down the doors of the mansion, what they witnessed shocked the entire neighborhood. A once admired family suddenly shattered, leaving countless unanswered questions. Where had they gone? And why had a seemingly perfect life transformed into an inescapable nightmare? Join us as Crime Documentary Files explores this case. On October 10th, 2012, the streets of Newport Beach stretched out in peaceful tranquility, each clean neighborhood appearing meticulously groomed. Yet behind the high walls of this exclusive residential area, a tragedy was quietly unfolding its first pages. That afternoon, as usual, the school bus arrived punctually at the stop, gently dropping off the children. At this hour, parents would typically be waiting with smiles to greet their children. But today, something was different. The 3 Chadwick boys stood watching with no sign of their parents anywhere. Big brother, with worried eyes, took out his phone to call home, but only long, hopeless rings answered. Time passed heavily as each friend was picked up one by one, leaving only the 2 brothers standing alone at the empty bus stop, their shadows lengthening in the fading afternoon light. Witnessing their situation, a neighbor with kind eyes approached, gently inquiring and offering to take the boys home. When they arrived at the Chadwick mansion's gate, the doorbell rang like a call into emptiness. Silence, a frightening silence, was all they received. The neighbor felt a chill run down their spine, an ominous feeling creeping into their mind. They tried calling the children's parents again, but still only heard unanswered rings. Sensing the unusual situation, without further hesitation, the neighbor decided to call the police. Upon receiving the report, police immediately arrived at the scene. This upscale neighborhood was home to many celebrities and elite individuals, including NBA superstar Kobe Bryant. The Chadwick mansion stood imposingly like a massive 2-story masterpiece worth $2.5 million, a symbol of success and wealth. Officers stood at the gate, continuously knocking and calling with increasing urgency, but the mansion remained eerily silent. After a brief discussion and with growing concern, they made the difficult decision to break in and search the entire house. As soon as they crossed the threshold into the luxurious interior, an atmosphere of unease enveloped them. In the kitchen, they discovered an interrupted lunch. Ingredients scattered across the table as if the cook had been suddenly disrupted and hastily departed. As officers continued their methodical search, they entered the master bathroom, where a truly horrifying scene awaited. Fragments of a vase and glass cups lay scattered on the floor, while the bathtub rim was covered with terrifying blood splatters. Even more alarming, blood clearly marked the drain area, and tiny drops of fresh red blood were printed on the walls. The entire scene painted an unmistakable picture. This elegant space had just witnessed a violent and brutal confrontation. On the bedside table, a mobile phone was still charging, next to a delicate woman's ring left behind, a silent sign that the female owner had departed in a hurry. In the corner of the room, the safe door gaped open like a black mouth, all items inside having been taken. The chaotic scene created a painful contrast to the usual refined elegance of this luxurious mansion. The investigators exchanged glances, understanding without words that they were facing a situation far beyond an ordinary disappearance. They immediately requested access to the neighborhood's security camera system, hoping the surveillance would reveal valuable clues about what had truly happened here. From the surveillance footage emerged a haunting image. A white SUV slowly gliding out of the garage around 1:30 p.m. on that fateful afternoon, silently moving out of the residential area and vanishing into the horizon at the end of the street. What was notable, only Peter Chadwick sat alone behind the wheel with no sign of Kui Chu, his wife, in the vehicle. This information pushed investigators into a high-alert state. The equation was filled with inconsistent variables: a husband driving away, a wife missing without a trace, and a home scene that had endured violent conflict. All these disconnected pieces were forming a highly concerning picture. While the investigation team was frantically searching for clues, a sudden turning point appeared at dawn the next day. An urgent call from a San Diego gas station, hundreds of miles from the scene, pulled the case in an entirely new direction. On the other end was Peter, the man they were looking for. Through the static of the telephone line, his voice shattered by extreme fear, trembling as he told a horrifying story beyond imagination. I'm at Crystal gas station. His broken voice came through between gasping breaths. My wife is dead. The emergency dispatcher sat up straight, immediately typing an alert code on the keyboard. Who harmed your wife? They took her, Peter blurted out, his voice shaking. Who is they, sir? The man who broke into my house. He drove and brought an accomplice. They're gone now. They disappeared with the truck. When did this happen? They killed her yesterday. Peter's voice choked. Yesterday, when we were still in Newport Beach. Can you identify the attackers? Juan. It was Juan. Which Juan? How do you know this person? I hired him, Peter stammered, to paint the house. I personally let him into my home. And exactly when did this tragedy occur? Midday yesterday, around 11 a.m. Peter's voice sank into a chilling silence before continuing. They're holding her body. They threatened to dismember her. Who is holding your wife's body? Juan and Chen. So they took your wife when she died at 11 a.m. Yes, they stuffed her into the car. How do you know your wife is dead? She drowned. There was an unusual pause before Peter added, I was forced to go with them in the car. They said they would cut up her body. The officer noticed inconsistencies in the story, but kept a calm voice. Please confirm your full name. Peter Chadwick. In his detailed statement, Peter described the chain of tragic events that led to his wife's death. According to him, everything began around noon when he hired a painter named Juan to repaint the walls. Peter led Juan to the second floor to check the conditions, then went downstairs to the living room to get some documents. At this point, his wife, Kui Chu, was showering in the upstairs bathroom, completely unaware of the stranger's presence in the house. In the brief moment after Peter went downstairs, a terrified scream from upstairs tore through the quiet atmosphere. Heart pounding, Peter rushed back up the stairs, only to witness a nightmare scene. Juan standing there, holding a gleaming knife, while Kui Chu lay motionless on the floor, showing no signs of life. Before Peter could react, Juan pressed the blade against his neck, forcing him to place his wife's body in the back seat of the car and drive away. Under the threat to his life, Peter had to comply, driving the long distance all the way to San Diego. Upon arrival, Juan met an accomplice named Chen, and together they transferred Kui Chu's body into the back of a pickup truck. They left Peter at a nearby gas station, then drove toward the Mexican border, taking with them the evidence of the horrific crime. With still trembling hands and a panicked mind, Peter had found a public phone at the gas station to make this desperate call. Sitting in the emergency dispatch center, the 911 operator had heard many strange stories, but Peter's account made her truly suspicious. Her eyes narrowed, her mouse moving faster as she noted the contradictions in the story. Why would a painter suddenly attack a completely strange woman? She wondered to herself, while maintaining a professional tone on the phone. The train of thought continued. No motive, no history, no reason for a worker to risk committing murder right at a customer's home. The timeline made everything more suspicious. Peter claimed he went downstairs for less than a minute, yet in that extremely brief period, the killer had managed to attack, kill, and cause the victim to drown? How could an adult be drowned in less than a minute? And the most illogical point, what man would leave a complete stranger near the bathroom when his wife was in such a vulnerable state? Professional instinct prompted her to ask a key question. Are you on any medication, sir? She asked, her voice still gentle but sharp. Nothing heavy, Peter replied with some hesitation. No, nothing bad. The dispatcher's hands had secretly activated the call location tracking protocol while keeping Peter talking. Each passing second was precious for her colleagues to precisely locate this man. The important thing now was to keep him on the line, not letting him hang up or leave the gas station. "I understand, Mr. Chadwick," she said, her tone gentle and sympathetic. "I need you to help us understand more clearly what happened. Can you describe this man named Juan in more detail?" Behind her calm appearance, her mind analyzed every angle of this implausible story, while her other hand silently typed an emergency code to the response team. "Suspect shows signs of paranoia, possibly connected to homicide. Locate position. Approach with caution." In the blink of an eye, the patrol team had surrounded the gas station where Peter was hiding. The atmosphere was tense as officers approached, adjusting their armor, ready to face any situation. However, instead of an agitated or panicked suspect, they encountered a strangely calm Peter Chadwick. He sat there with an unsettling composure, as if waiting for a bus on an ordinary day, not someone who had just witnessed his wife being brutally murdered. No tears flowing, no trembling, none of the signs of grief or panic that anyone who had just lost a loved one tragically would experience. This calmness, an out-of-place calmness, set off professional alarm bells for the investigators. When escorting Peter to a safe place for questioning, the bright lights of the gas station revealed even more suspicious signs. Deep scratches on his neck as if clawed by sharp nails in desperation. On his right arm, teeth marks formed a perfect arc, traces of human teeth, and on his fingers, dried blood formed black scabs, lurking under his nails like secrets that could not be washed away. If someone holding a knife was threatening you, how could the victim leave such clear defensive wounds on you? An attacker with a weapon would keep a safe distance, not allowing the victim to get close enough to bite, scratch, or struggle. These wounds told a different story, the story of a close-quarters fight, a struggle between people who knew each other all too well. Such clear teeth marks could only form when the victim used their teeth as a final weapon in desperation. The scratches on the neck were signs of someone fighting back in panic, not marks from a planned attacker holding a knife. Each wound was a piece of the horrific picture of an intimate, violent, and deadly conflict between Peter and his own wife. As the investigation file grew thicker, the contradictions in Peter's story became more obvious. Investigators had retrieved the entire security camera system of this upscale neighborhood, and the results completely contradicted Peter's statement. Throughout that fateful day, no stranger had entered the Chadwick's gate. No painter named Juan. No intruder. The house had only two residents, Peter and Kui Chu, until the moment the white SUV left the house with only Peter inside. The characters Peter vividly described, the vicious Juan and the mysterious accomplice Chen, seemed to exist only in his fabricated story. Not a trace confirmed their presence. Not even a blurry image from dozens of cameras captured the shadows of those Peter had invented. The contradictions piled up as investigators analyzed the initial interrogation. Like an actor forgetting his script, Peter constantly changed details of his story. Initially, he claimed to be an unwilling witness, watching the killer take away his wife's body. But just hours later, he provided exact details down to the centimeter about the body disposal location. Information that only someone directly involved in the act could know. "How do you know exactly which dumpster your wife was taken to in that remote area?" the lead investigator asked, his eyes drilling into Peter. "Unless you were the one who put her there." Each contradictory detail was like a brick, gradually building a solid wall of suspicion. Peter's story didn't just have logical holes, it directly opposed peripheral evidence. Like a tightening net, the circle of truth gradually closed around the man who had tried to cover his crime with an outlandish story. Faced with police suspicion and evidence, Peter initially tried to evade, but confronted with indisputable proof, his psychological barriers gradually collapsed. Finally, he was forced to admit that he had fabricated this story. The two characters Juan and Chen did not exist at all. Everything was just lies he had carefully constructed to cover up his crime. So what drove him to murder his beloved wife? Behind the perfect appearance of a model family, what simmering conflicts and secrets were being hidden? Police had to dig deeper into their past to clarify the truth behind this shocking case. Peter, then 48, held dual British-American citizenship. As a student at the University of Arizona, he had met Kui Chu, a Malaysian Chinese female student 2 years his junior. They quickly developed feelings for each other, progressed to marriage, and welcomed 3 adorable sons. In the eyes of friends, neighbors, and community, Peter and Kui Chu were always seen as an admirable couple, successful, happy, and fulfilled. Peter quickly established a reputation in real estate thanks to his sharp vision and outstanding business ability. In a short time, he had accumulated considerable assets, becoming one of the local standouts. Meanwhile, Kui Chu was the model of a family woman, gentle, skillful, and dedicated. She managed everything at home, taking meticulous care of their 3 sons, from meals to education, always impressing neighbors with the tidiness and warmth of their home. The Chadwick family wasn't just affluent, but also very close-knit. They regularly organized intimate gatherings, inviting friends over for meals, conversation, and sharing joy. Family trips were also an essential part when the whole family enjoyed nature together and preserved happy moments. In the eyes of those around them, they were the model of an ideal family that everyone aspired to. However, as the years passed and the 3 children grew up, cracks in their seemingly happy marriage began to show. During the investigation, police discovered a handwritten note hidden in a closet, marked "Excerpts from Peter's computer." Its contents made one shudder. Detailed information related to torture, abortion costs, massages with the opposite sex. Police suspected this was evidence that Kui Chu had quietly recorded after discovering her husband's misconduct. More heartbreaking, Peter had not only betrayed marital trust, but also carried an unhealthy disease, which he had transmitted to his own wife. Faced with this betrayal and immense hurt, Kui Chu had wanted to divorce many times, to end this rotten marriage. But each time she looked at her 3 young sons, thinking about them growing up in a broken home, the mother's heart softened. She loved her children deeply, always wanting them to grow up in a complete family, even when her spouse was no longer worthy. Kui Chu had tried to mend this cracked marriage, hoping Peter would change and return to the family. However, instead of restraining himself, he became increasingly depraved and flagrant. Realizing this relationship had reached a point beyond salvation, Kui Chu decided to stand up and reclaim justice for herself and the children. She hired professional lawyers, quietly collected evidence of her husband's infidelity, and began reviewing their joint assets, preparing for an uncompromising divorce. When the lawsuit officially began, tensions between them erupted violently. The issue of asset division became the biggest flashpoint. Peter owned a real estate company worth tens of millions of dollars, while Kui Chu believed that with her years of sacrifice for the family, she fully deserved a proportionate share of assets. But Peter didn't think so. Fearing his enormous wealth would be divided, he began looking for ways to hide it, even quietly transferring assets elsewhere to evade responsibility. A few days before the incident, Kui Chu was still tutoring math to her youngest son as usual, enjoying Asian cuisine with her eldest son and meticulously planning for Thanksgiving, still full of hope for life. However, she couldn't have imagined that a nightmare was gradually approaching. On the morning of October 10th, 2012, as usual, Kui Chu was preparing lunch in the cozy kitchen. Peter entered, and within moments, they began discussing the tense divorce issue. Words quickly escalated into a fierce argument. From the living room to the bathroom, the two violently struggled with each other. Later, neighbors recalled that on that day, they had heard terrible screams coming from Peter's house, but within seconds, everything sank back into silence. Thinking it was just a normal family argument, no one called the police. The forensic report showed that Kui Chu was first strangled until unconscious, then drowned. Her body was covered in wounds. According to Peter's later testimony, after committing the crime, his mind was blank, thinking only about how to hide his crime. He carelessly discarded bloody towels, took money from the safe, trying to create the scene of a robbery. Afterward, he wrapped Kui Chu's body in a blanket, placed it in the back seat of the SUV, and drove to San Diego. There, he threw the body into a dumpster, trying to make his wife disappear forever. Regarding the search for the body, fate seemed to have decided. Based on clues Peter provided, police found a large dumpster on a remote hillside. In it, they discovered Quichu's body, along with her wallet containing her green card and $10,000. This dumpster should have been moved away days earlier, but due to a fee dispute, no one had come to handle it. Thanks to this, the body was preserved, becoming important evidence for conviction. After Peter's arrest, the case entered the judicial process. Since he was a well-known local real estate tycoon with social status and considerable wealth, his legal team requested bail. After negotiation, 2 months later, Peter was temporarily released on a high bail amount of $100 million. But he had to comply with a series of bail conditions, including surrendering his passport, regularly reporting to police, and living with his father in Santa Barbara while awaiting trial. During his time on bail, Peter outwardly cooperated with the judicial process, punctually attending hearings and investigations. But in reality, he was constantly calculating how to escape legal punishment. He even knew that if convicted, what awaited him would be a long prison sentence. The assets and status he had worked hard to build would vanish into thin air. Therefore, Peter secretly began planning his escape. First, he secretly transferred millions of dollars from bank accounts, dispersing this money into many hidden accounts to provide economic security for life on the run. At the same time, he bought several survival guidebooks, learning escape and disguise techniques. Finally, at the 10th court session in January 2015, Peter failed to appear in court on time. He had disappeared. When informed of his disappearance, police quickly went to his father's house to investigate. Investigators discovered several books in his room, including How to Change Your Identity, Survival Guide While on the Run, etc. Police also discovered Peter had withdrawn $600,000 from the family trust account and withdrawn large amounts of cash through credit cards. Not only that, he left many misleading clues on his computer, such as searches for travel records to Canada, receipts for flights to South Africa, and information on how to survive in Mexico. Police traced his movements by examining airport surveillance cameras. Surveillance footage showed Peter wearing women's clothing, taking a taxi to the airport, but instead of boarding a plane, he just wandered around the airport seemingly observing the surroundings. 6 hours later, he went into a restroom, changed back into men's clothing, threw his phone in the trash, and once again took a taxi away from the airport. Peter's disappearance brought the case to a standstill. Police realized that apprehending this cunning criminal would face enormous challenges. Before long, 3.5 years passed without a clue. But they didn't give up, instead intensifying their investigation efforts, placing Peter on the FBI's list of 15 most wanted fugitives and announcing a $25,000 reward, hoping to collect relevant clues. Meanwhile, Newport Beach police even created a blog specifically to publicize this case, trying to find some traces from the vast amount of information. Heaven rewards the persistent. In 2019, police finally received an important clue, giving the case hope once again. It turned out that during his time on the run, Peter had always used the alias Michael Smith, hiding in the nooks and crannies of Mexico. Initially, he stayed in luxury hotels, but when hotels began checking passports, he was forced to change accommodations frequently, finding small inns that didn't require registration. To avoid investigation, Peter had forged many documents, including an American driver's license and Canadian passport. The funniest thing was that he even made a shield agent certificate. With these fake documents, he moved freely in Mexico, successfully deceiving many people, even local police. He did temporary jobs in different places, sometimes as a restaurant server, sometimes as a kitchen assistant, to maintain his life. But the net of heaven has large meshes, yet nothing escapes it. An anonymous reporter revealed to police that they had discovered a suspicious person very similar to Peter in the city of Puebla, southeast of Mexico City. Police immediately deployed action, coordinating with Mexican authorities to conduct a comprehensive search of this area. In August 2019, after a long period of surveillance and investigation, police finally caught Peter in a humble residence. By this time, his appearance had changed somewhat. Dyed black hair, grown a beard, trying to evade capture. Police found many important pieces of evidence in his residence, making it impossible for him to deny his identity. Peter Chadwick's capture marked an important breakthrough in this years-long murder and escape case. He would be extradited to the United States to face legal judgment, paying a deserved price for his crime. For Quichu's family and friends, although this news came a bit late, it also brought them some comfort. They looked forward to justice being served, allowing the deceased to rest in peace. At trial, police presented a complete chain of evidence. Skin samples remaining under Quichu's fingernails belonged to her husband Peter. This showed the two had a violent conflict. In the bathroom, besides the couple's blood, no third person's blood was found. Additionally, at the body disposal scene in the dumpster, analysis of the blanket fibers wrapping the body found the material completely matched the blankets from the Chadwick home. This discovery not only confirmed Peter's body disposal behavior, but also reinforced his crime, making the chain of evidence even more complete. Faced with irrefutable evidence, 10 years after the crime, in 2022, he finally reached a plea agreement with police. Initially, prosecutors charged first-degree murder, but after a series of legal battles, prosecutors finally accepted a plea agreement for second-degree murder. Under the agreement, Peter waived his right to appeal and was sentenced to 15 years to life, with previous detention time not counting toward the sentence. After the sentencing, widespread controversy erupted in society. Although Peter cried when pleading guilty, saying his wife was a great mother, that he had destroyed everything, that he was very remorseful, apologizing to his 3 children, Quichu's family believed these were just Peter's fake tears to get a reduced sentence. Facing outside skepticism, the Orange County District Attorney said this sentence was the result of careful consideration. They had taken into account Quichu's family, especially her 3 sons, who, after experiencing a series of heavy blows such as their mother being murdered and their father fleeing, were exhausted both physically and mentally. If a lengthy trial proceeded, the children would be forced once again to face the cruel details of their father killing their mother, which would certainly be a second trauma for them. Accepting the plea agreement could help end the case quickly, allowing the children to continue life in a relatively quiet environment, which was also a form of protection for the victims' relatives. The case of Peter Chadwick, outwardly a model husband but a cold-blooded killer underneath, finally closed after nearly a decade of persistent pursuit. But the losses can never be repaired. Quichu departed forever at age 46, taking with her hopes and love not yet fulfilled for her 3 young sons. The once warm home now exists only as fragments of broken memories. In the end, justice was served. But the price paid. Quichu's sacrifice and the shattered childhood of 3 children will forever remain an unhealable wound in the hearts of those left behind. And that is today's case. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in upcoming videos.